welcome one and all to this webinar, Truthful Consumerism in Retail, exclusive to you, clients of TW Premium. I am David Mattin, Global Head of Trends and Insights here at Trend Watching, speaking to you from the giant robot suit. I borrowed it from Jeff Bezos. Not really. I'm speaking to you from the London office where my colleagues are hard at work, spotting the trends, writing about the trends, making the PDFs, booking the next workshop, all for you guys because you are insatiable. But today, we are here to talk about our new big idea, truthful consumerism, but particularly through the lens of the retail industry. Truthful consumerism in retail is what we're here to talk about. So it all starts with our new big idea, truthful consumerism. And I don't have to spend too long on this because you guys can dive in to the Trend Watching Quarterly section of the website and read all about truthful consumerism if you haven't already. Trend Watching Quarterly is, of course, our new content product. We asked you guys for feedback about content. You gave it. We listened. You wanted deeper, richer content. You wanted more contact with analysts. You wanted more webinars like this. You wanted more industry-specific stuff. We listened to all of that. We launched Trend Watching Quarterly. Truthful consumerism is the first big idea in the Trend Watching Quarterly series. Truthful consumerism is all about the future of consumerism in a world of polarization, populism, and post-truth. If you've read the PDF already, you know all of this already, so I'm not going to spend long on it. But 2016 and the events of 2016 plunged us into this new moment. The election of Trump in the US, Brexit in the UK, but events all over the world. Duterte in the Philippines, the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff, alternative for Germany. You've got Marine Le Pen hovering on the horizon for the French presidential elections in April. We're in this new moment. We all feel it. And it's a moment characterized by polarization, new kinds of populisms, the specter of post-truth, and lots of anger. The commentary about all of that has been endless. What we're interested in at Trend Watching and what we're trying to answer, and what I think we do answer with truthful consumerism, is okay, but what should brands do about that? How should brands respond? What does all this mean for the future of consumerism? What does it mean for the future of business? And how should brands respond in this new environment to thrive? And our answer, in a nutshell, the future still belongs to people who believe in progress. And progress comes via innovation. So your response as a brand, harness the power of innovation to build a better future for all. And this is where we really get down to the core of truthful consumerism, because we say, okay, how can you do that? How can you innovate to build a better future for all? The answer, our answer, is there are 5 key forces shaping our future now and in the years ahead. And despite all the uncertainty of this moment, they remain as powerful and as relevant as ever. These 5 big forces shaping our future are not going away. And those 5 forces, or those 5 truths, you can see what we've done there with truthful consumerism, are transparency, aspiration, positive impact, tolerance, and empowerment. Again, you can dive into Trend Watching Quarterly in the TW Premium service, read all about truthful consumerism if you haven't already, read all about these 5 truths. There it is. There's a screenshot I took for you so you know where you're going, but you've probably been there already. Go and read more if you want the background on truthful consumerism. You'll see also on the truthful consumerism page 5 industry-specific reports. So 5 reports. We've taken the usual industry updates that you guys love, and we've used them to look at truthful consumerism through 5 big industries. And of course, as I say, the one we're interested in today is retail. We've got more coming down the line: food and beverage, financial services, and so on. There are webinars coming down the line this week on those industries and truthful consumerism. But today is all about retail, looking at truthful consumerism through the lens of retail. And what we've done in each of those reports is we've chosen one big truth to focus on, one big truth out of those 5 that we think is especially, particularly relevant for that industry and offers a special, particular, and most powerful opportunities for businesses in that industry. And the truth we've chosen for retail is transparency. Okay, transparency is the truth in retail perhaps above all the other truths right now. And that's what we're going to look at. Okay, transparency in retail. There are so many. Decided to do it is this. We're going to talk. Okay, so that workshop, the kind of workshop we do with clients all the time, where we're going to take our simple tool, the consumer trend canvas, and we're going to unpack this truth, or this trend, if you like, transparency, and analyze it and use it to ask, how can we use it to come up with new ideas for your business, new products, new services, new campaigns, new business models. So we're going to unpack this truth that is transparency, use it to come up with new ideas, and along the way you will see why we believe it's so particularly powerful for the retail industry, why we chose it to be the special truth for the retail industry report. Okay, and there's a lovely picture of us doing one of these workshops live. This is the kind of workshop with this tool that we do all the time with you guys, with clients, with others. And it starts here. It starts with this tool, the consumer trend canvas. You can see the tool is broken into two halves. One half is analyze, the other half is apply. So the analyze half of this tool, what we're going to do is break the trend, or the truth in this case, that is transparency, down into its constituent parts. We're going to ask some questions about it and analyze it. Then we're going to take that analysis and move over to the apply section, where we ask a couple of big, simple, but powerful questions that then funnel us towards an idea, a new product, a new service, a new campaign for your business. Now, of course, we're going to do this super, super quickly. This is the type of thing where you really want to download this tool, which of course you guys as clients have access to. Download this tool, take the methodology that you see or hear today, and do this with your team. But this is going to be a super quick run through just to give you the idea, and hopefully we'll have some fun with it. It starts with this tool. First, we're going to analyze, then we're going to apply. And like I was saying, this is a simple tool that just gets you to ask a few big questions about a trend in order to turn that trend into a new idea. It's an ideation tool that lets you turn a trend into a new idea. That's the key thing to bear in mind about this tool as we go through. So now we're just going to go step by step through this tool, use plugging in the truth, or if you want to use a different word, the trend that is transparency, into this tool, working all the way through to an idea at the end of it. Okay. And it starts here. This is box number 1, as you can see, of the analyze section. It's inspiration. And this is a really simple box, because this is essentially just a box that says, what other examples of this truth that is transparency have we seen? And of course, we're thinking about retail, so we want them to be retail examples. So what retail examples of transparency have we seen recently? Let's have a look. This is number 1. This is Stella McCartney. This is the luxury fashion brand, very recently doing something very interesting, launching environmental profit and loss accounting. Okay, so actually quantifying with profit and loss accounting the impact that their brand has on the planet. Brand transparency of this kind is pretty common. You know, we're going to open the doors a bit. We're going to tell you about the impact that we're having. This is pushing it a step further, I would say. This is going so far as to quantify it, to apply a quantitative methodology to the question, what is our impact on the planet? So a very interesting example from the retail industry of brand transparency. So that's 1. This is number 2. This is a really intriguing example. This is Orin. This is the US-based activewear brand in August 2016. They crowdsourced their product line and manufacturing decisions. They essentially went to the crowd and said, what kind of products do you think we should make? And even deeper than that, what do you think our brand values and sort of consequent behaviors should be? Tell us what you think we should make and what our brand values should be. So a different kind of transparency to the Stella McCartney example. This is about opening the doors and saying, we're going to be totally transparent about how we're making these decisions. In fact, we're going to empower you with us to make those decisions. Okay, so really taking transparency a step further, not just opening the doors, but inviting the consumer in, so to speak. And if you're interested in the results, 43% of people said sports bras No, 43% of people said tank tops versus 31% for sports bras. And they also asked people, should we pay our factory workers the bare minimum wage or the living wage? And you could actually see the price changing, that the implications for price in real time as you made these decisions or made your votes. And surprisingly, perhaps 88% of people said pay them only the minimum wage because we want the products to be as cheap as possible. So interesting, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. But still, a very interesting example of transparency in the retail industry. This is another example of just that. This is Amazon. In November 2016, they launched a new feature in their app called Package X-Ray. So you open the app, scan your Amazon package label, and it will immediately tell you what is inside the package. So just a super quick, super convenient way of giving people information, just making the entire world more transparent, or at least your little corner of it. Okay? If you think about expectations around transparency, yes, there's the expectation that your brand should be more knowable and more transparent. There's also the expectation, fueled by kind of the online space, that the entire world should just be more knowable, more transparent, more instantly informative. And you can see Amazon tapping into that expectation here with this feature in their app. So another interesting retail transparency example. This is Sudacas. This is the Argentinian furniture brand. In July 2016, they did a crowdfunding campaign for a new bookcase of theirs. And this crowdfunding campaign came with an interesting feature, which was that if you contributed, you could then actually watch a live stream of the bookcase, of the product being built. So you can see your product being built in front of your very eyes. You can see how that is a very interesting, very tangible form of brand transparency. You know, just tap into our process in real time. You're going to see everything about how we make this thing. You know, there's nothing hidden, there's no holds barred, just a live stream of how we do it. A very interesting example of retail transparency. And the last example I want to show you is this, is ICA. This is the Swedish supermarket chain. They produced a recipe book with kind of recipes that were ranked for their impact on the environment. Okay, so the ingredients in this recipe and the entire recipe is ranked for how sustainable, how environmentally friendly it is. So again, just tapping into that expectation, not so much around make your brand more transparent, but more around make the world more transparent and instantly knowable. Give me the information I need when I need it. Help me just know more about the world as a brand in a relevant way. That's a very interesting example, again, of retail brand transparency. So what we do with the consumer trend canvas, I just want to show you it in its entirety very quickly. What we do with the consumer trend canvas is we stick post-its on to remind us of our thoughts. Okay, so the inspiration box, you can see that's the first box to complete. All we're going to do is stick post-its on, reminding us of the examples, of the inspiration we've seen. And just a quick note, obviously, there are so many examples I could have showed you. You can dive into the industry update report itself to see more examples of retail brands and transparency. And of course, you can dive into the database, the inspiration dashboard, to keep tracking this yourself. If you think that the truth that is transparency corresponds most closely to the mega trend that is infolust, and we'll talk about how the 5 truths map over to the mega trends a bit later. But the truth that is transparency really maps most closely to the mega trend that is infolust. So if you do this in the database, if you filter for infolust and retail, you're going to see a whole ton of examples just like this, lots of which will be relevant to your thinking when it comes to retail and transparency and what's happening right now in that space, or where those two intersect, where retail intersects with transparency. So just a quick note, you can keep tracking this yourself for as long as you want in the database. But that's the inspiration box done. Then we move on to the second box. That's the basic needs box. That's where we ask ourselves, okay, for this trend that we are unpacking, which is in this case transparency, as we know, the truth that is transparency, what are the big basic needs at work? These are the big human needs at work when it comes to this trend. And of course, as we always say, and we all know, the biggest, most fundamental human needs are not needs that change over time. They're needs that are fundamental to our nature. They express themselves in different ways, but they've always been there all through human history, and they always will be there. What are the big, basic human needs at work when it comes to transparency? We can race through this really quickly because it's not rocket science, far from it. Trust, of course, is one of the huge ones. We all want to engage with others, whether it's other people, other businesses, other organizations that we trust. We have a human need for trust in our relationships. That's one of the big basic needs at work when it comes to transparency. Information is one of the big basic human needs at work when it comes to transparency. We want to know about the people, the institutions, the organizations that we are engaging with. We want to know more about the world. I mean, if there's anything more deeply human than that, it's hard to think of it. We just have an innate yearning to know more, especially though when it comes to our own interactions with the world around us. We want to know more about who we're dealing with. And a third big basic human need when it comes to transparency is fair and sustainable societies. There's a basic human need to feel that we live in a society that is fair, that treats us fairly, that is fair to others, and that is fair reliably, and that is also sustainable in that it's not going to implode or explode in the years ahead, because that would be deeply troubling. So that's a third big basic human need when it comes to transparency. We want to feel that the big organizations, the big brands that are helping to shape the society we live in are helping to create a fair and sustainable society. And the only way for us to really know that is for us to be able to see inside them, for them to be transparent. So 3 big basic human needs at work when it comes to transparency. Stick them, put them on your Post-its, stick them in the basic needs box, and we can move on to the next box. The next box is probably the weightiest one. That's the drivers of change box. That's where we ask ourselves, okay, for this trend, in this case, transparency, what is changing that's fueling it? What's changing that's making this relevant now? What's changing that's influencing how it's expressing itself now? And as we answer this, so this is really the why. Why is this happening? And as we answer this, as we go through to answer this in a minute, you'll see why, I hope, we chose this particular truth, transparency, as particularly relevant for retail. Because this is really where we get to the why. And so you'll see, well, why is this happening and why is it particularly relevant for retail? So let's have a look. Why is transparency such a big, powerful force now? And why is it particularly relevant in retail? Well, number one, connectivity. You know, the big driver of transparency is this explosion in connectivity. More than 50% of all humans use a smartphone. And this is something we talk more about in the full Truthful Consumerism briefing. This explosion in connectivity is driving an explosion in transparency because humans now, connected humans, can now pretty much find out anything they want almost in an instant. When it comes to retail, there's a particular relevance there in that connectivity, connected societies are driving the phenomenon that is peer reviews. There's peers talking to one another about what's good and what isn't good. Yes, peer reviews is something that we as trend watchers, you know, communities like us that are interested in trends have been talking about for years and years and years. But if you look at this graph of the growth of peer reviews being posted on Yelp, you can see that the growth is really only just taking off now. There's a huge amount of runway left. Okay, so peer reviews is really driving transparency in the retail sector, and for the mainstream it's only just getting started now. So that's a really powerful driver of transparency in retail. And another big reason is the guilt spiral. This is the fact that rising numbers of consumers feel trapped in this spiral of guilt when it comes to their consumption and the negative impacts on the planet, on society, on themselves that they know their consumption has. And that is driving them really to want to find out more about the brands and businesses they engage with. So that, again, this guilt spiral is a powerful driver of the demand for and the expectation for transparency. And by the way, there's one thing I should have told you about this box right at the beginning, and that is that it's divided into two. So we tend to divide our drivers of change broadly into two. The first is shifts. Those are the kind of slower moving, long-term changes that are helping push this trend along, in this case, transparency along. The other one, the other side of the box, are the triggers. Those are the short-term, more instant, more recent changes that are helping to push this trend, in this case, transparency along. Okay, so shifts and triggers. And the first three I just talked to you about, connectivity, peer reviews, the guilt spiral, I'd call those more shifts. They are big, long-term changes. You know, we've been becoming a more connected society now for, you know, years, if not decades. The guilt spiral, awareness of the negative impacts of consumption has been building for years, if not decades. Let's have a look at some triggers, some more recent changes that are fueling this truth that is transparency. The first is this new wave of ethical, sustainable startups that are reshaping people's expectations around what consumerism can and should look like from a sort of ethical, sustainable perspective. If you think about brands such as Tom's, the buy one, give one shoe brand, or Tesla, the green car brand, they're reconfiguring what people expect when it comes to how ethical and how sustainable and how good consumerism can be. And that's pushing them to want to know more about the other brands, the legacy brands even, that they engage with. They want to know how good those brands are. Do they match up to the ethical startups that are on offer? Because if they don't, maybe then I should choose, you know, the ethical insurgent brand and not the legacy brand. So it's really driving this demand for transparency. Another trigger driving the demand for transparency is the filter bubble. It's this rising awareness that online we're all trapped in this bubble that serves us ideas and opinions and news that's kind of tailored to who we are and confirms what we already agree with. That is playing out particularly acutely or interestingly, I would say, in retail, because the filter bubble also pertains to the pricing we see when we shop online and the recommendations we see when we shop online. Amazon's telling us, buy this book because you bought all these other books. We know we're trapped in this bubble, this filter bubble, when it comes to our shopping, our retail online. And rising numbers are starting to wonder, especially when it comes to pricing, what would it look like if I could pop that bubble, step outside and see what you're serving, price-wise, recommendation-wise, to others, to other consumers. And that is driving demand for transparency on pricing and transparency on recommendations. Third trigger is live streaming. We saw that in an example with Sudacas, the Argentinian furniture brand. Okay, consumers know live streaming is out there. They know it's a thing. Some of them are doing it themselves. Why can't you as a brand live stream yourself? You know, if it's possible, why can't you do it? If you're not doing it, have you got something to hide? So that's driving this demand, that's fueling this truth, this trend that is transparency. And last, of course, the trigger that never really goes away, the short-term trigger that never really goes away but changes over time, is news, is stuff that happens, incidents, scandals, events, disasters that happen. We all remember the whole Volkswagen thing a while back. When people hear that car manufacturers are cheating on their emissions, of course, that gets their attention and that drives demand to know more about that brand and what's really going on in there. And, you know, of course, what's really going on inside every brand. So news such as that, which is becoming more and more common because it doesn't have to be mainstream media news now. It can be online. It can be fed to you by a peer. That's driving demand for transparency, demand that brands open up their doors and are really transparent about what is going on inside. So when you whap all that onto the canvas, it looks like this. You can see our shifts, our triggers, answering the why is this happening now? Why is this relevant now and powerful now? And of course, because we're talking about the truth that is transparency for retail, we've done that with particular relevance to the retail industry. Why is transparency happening now in retail? Why is it particularly relevant in retail? Because of things like peer reviews, clean slate brands like Tom's, the filter bubble and pricing, live streaming, the guilt spiral. These are all reasons why transparency is such a powerful force in retail right now. And that's, of course, why we chose it to focus on when we were looking at truthful consumerism through the lens of retail. And then we get to the last box in the analyze section, that analyze the first half of the trend canvas. This is emerging expectations. And this is really about saying, okay, when you put those basic human needs together with those drivers of change, you've got some human needs that never change. You've got some changes going on in the outside world, shifts and triggers. When you put them all together, what emerging expectations come about? In other words, what new things do consumers start to expect from brands and businesses? And this is where it can really pay to just remind yourself of the examples, because often within the examples, you can see the answer to these emerging expectations. So you remember you had Stella McCartney producing a new kind of transparency, environmental profit and loss accounting. You had Sudocas live streaming their product manufacture. Okay, so again, a new kind of information when it comes to transparency. And you had Orin inviting people in, crowdsourcing opinion when it comes to what products we should make, what our brand values should be. And you can translate those examples and the others we looked at and lots of others that you would find yourself into the emerging expectations, the emerging consumer expectations when it comes to transparency, new kinds of information, Stella McCartney, real-time information, Sudocas, feedback incorporated into the product, Orin with its crowdsourcing opinion on product line and brand values. And you could find other examples or look at the other examples we talked through and extract an emerging expectation from them as well. But the crucial thing is that in this box, you answer that question. What new consumer expectations, what new human expectations really are coming about? Because humans have these basic human needs, and we've seen what they are, and these things are changing in the world, and you kind of clash those together and ask, okay, what new things are people expecting because of that clash? And the answer really to that emerging expectation box, when you put those emerging expectations together, new kinds of information, I expect new kinds of information, I expect real-time information, I expect feedback incorporated into the brand, and so on and so on. All of those are really just a different way of saying, cumulatively, the expectation that is transparency, the expectation that is the truth or the trend that we're talking about. I expect brands to be transparent is the overarching statement that all those other statements are just little shards of. That's how you've arrived back at the trend, or the truth as we're calling it now, for this topic that is transparency. Okay, and so just a really quick point here. I just wanted to show you a blank canvas again, just to make this point really quickly. This is an ideation session where we're taking a trend, transparency, and we're using this tool to turn it into an idea. And what we've done is we've started with the trend and we've broken it down into its constituent parts. So we've said, what are the examples of the trend? What are the basic human needs fueling this trend? What are the drivers of change fueling this trend? What are the emerging expectations that come about from those basic needs and those drivers of change? So we've broken the trend down into its constituent parts. If you wanted to spot a trend, you could start with some examples. So don't start with the trend, you've got no trend. Just start with a cluster of similar examples, put those in your inspiration box, and then ask yourself the same questions about the examples. What are the basic human needs fueling these examples? What are the basic human needs that these examples answer? What are the drivers of change making these examples possible now? The Orin example wouldn't be possible without live streaming. Okay, so that's a driver of change fueling that example. What are the emerging expectations that these examples are trying to answer? And in answering those questions about the examples, you would then be able to discern the trend or spot the trend that those examples are pointing towards. Okay, so these 4 questions about examples, basic human needs, drivers of change, and emerging expectations are fundamental to our methodology. They are absolutely at the heart of the trend watching trend methodology. And you can see how when it's an ideation session, what we do is start with a trend and take that trend apart into those constituent parts. If we're trend spotting, then what we do at trend watching is we start with a cluster of examples that we've spotted ourselves or that our network has spotted, and we answer those questions about those examples to spot the trend. So you can disassemble a trend, or you can start with examples and put a trend together using those constituent blocks. So just a really quick point about our trend methodology, and of course really happy to answer questions about that, talk a bit about that more at the end. Hopefully if you do have questions, you're typing them in, because we'll have some time at the end for questions, or you can always email me, david@trendwatching.com. Happy to answer your questions about methodology or anything else there. And of course, remember, you can keep tracking the trend that is transparency in retail via the online database, filter for InfoLust, filter for retail, and you'll continue to see examples. You can continue to see how transparency in retail is evolving. You might see a cluster of similar examples yourself that enable you to spot a little mini trend within transparency using that methodology. Okay. So on to the second half of the canvas. This is really the business end of the canvas. This is where we go, okay, we've analyzed the trend that is transparency. We've broken it down into its constituent parts. We've thought about it. We've analyzed it. We're going to move on to the second half now, which is about applying it. In other words, using that trend and the analysis we have generated of it to come up with a new idea for our business, a new product, a new service, a new business model, a whole new brand, whatever it might be. That's what the apply section is all about. And the apply section is made up of two big, simple, powerful questions. Okay, and they are innovation target and who. And we're going to talk through those now. So the first is the innovation target. This is where you just answer the simple question, how could you apply this trend, in this case, transparency, to your business? And it's worth just here pausing to look at some examples of transparency outside the retail industry, because it's so powerful to look across industries, to look outside your own industry at what's happening elsewhere. That can really fuel you when it comes to having ideas about how you might apply this trend within your business. So just really quickly, some examples from outside the retail industry when it comes to transparency. This is Allet. This is a new wine brand. The brand has launched all around the premise of transparency. So what they're doing is they're saying we're going to be utterly transparent about how we price this wine. And we're going to break down that pricing for you into the price for sort of the grapes, pressing the grapes, putting it in a bottle, taking it to the place it needs to be. Total price transparency, which is very powerful in the wine industry, of course, because wine is such an opaque business. It's such an opaque industry. No one really understands why a particular bottle of wine has to cost what it costs. Allet's trying to explode that. It's trying to puncture that mystery by saying, we are the world's first wine brand built totally around the idea of transparency. This is Uber. They're doing something really interesting. They recently launched a data-driven restaurant guide. So they've harvested a load of data from Uber rides, and they've used that data to create a guide to popular restaurants. Okay, so this is not about what Allet are doing, which is about making your brand more transparent. This is that other side of the coin we've talked about, make the entire world more transparent, make the world more knowable. And you think when Uber can start to harvest its data to make the world more knowable in this really useful way, to create a restaurant guide, what are consumer expectations going to be when it comes to you and your data and the way that you could make the world more knowable? Okay, if Uber are doing this kind of useful stuff, what are you doing? And could that inspire an idea for you to help make the world more transparent? And last, just to throw this in, to show where expectations are heading here and how crazy it's becoming, this is the new Changhong H2 smartphone launched at CES or unveiled at CES in January 2017. This smartphone features a molecular scanner that can tell you the constituent materials within whatever you scan. So it uses near infrared light to scan the material, and the app then tells you what the material's made of. So you can scan, you know, cosmetics, you can scan food, you can even scan yourself and find out how fat you are if you so desire. That is insane. Okay, that's a glimpse of where expectations are heading, how high expectations are accelerating when it comes to transparency, making the entire world more transparent, making the world more knowable. Now, when consumers see, remember, they don't have to buy it. Okay, in the expectation economy, they just have to see an innovation like this to have their expectations reconfigured. What are they going to come to you expecting? Okay, think about your retail experiences. Think about your shops. Can I go into your shop and scan anything with a device you give me, or even with my smartphone eventually, and find out what's inside it? Can I even scan your labels and find out anything at the moment? You know, if this is what consumers are seeing, this is what's leading their expectations, where are you? How are you responding? So looking outside your industry like this, when it comes to thinking about where in the business you will apply the trend, can be really powerful and should give you some new ideas. Okay, so here's some ideas where you could apply the trend that is transparency within your business. It could be a new business model for you. Think about Alit and how they've created an entire brand around the truth that is transparency. And that's also intimately linked to another post that you can see. It could be a new pricing strategy for you, because of course Alit's transparency is closely linked to how it's priced. It could be something to do with the packaging. It could be a digital service as a campaign. Think about Uber, essentially, you know, a campaign built around a new service it's providing, you know, data-driven restaurant guides. What kind of useful digital service could you provide that makes the world more knowable, like Uber did, that could be a cool campaign for you? It could be a retail experience, like I said, inspired by that smartphone scanner. You know, what kind of theater can you create in your store that's amazing, that will draw people in like that, like a product scanner would do right now? So looking across industries like that, it's a powerful way of coming up with ideas for where in your business you will apply the trend. And then the next question you want to ask yourself is, who am I aiming at? Who is this new product that I want to, or service or business model, whatever, who should I aim at? Who is my target customer? The answer might just be everyone, in which case fine, but it's worth having a think about particular niches that you want to tap into. Who are your customers now? What do they care about? Who do you want your customers to be? How can you serve them? What resources do you have? And so on. So I've just put a couple of ideas in here. Of course, the ideas you come up with will be totally different. You know, you might say to yourself, yeah, it's luxury consumers who are trapped in the guilt spiral. Those are the people we want to serve. You know, if you're a luxury brand, those are the people we want to reach out to. We think we have an opportunity. You know, our consumers are luxury consumers. We know they feel guilty. Let's develop something for them. We're a fashion brand. You know, we know people are ever more wary about the impact of brands on the planet. So our target is fashion lovers with a conscience. Who's your target group? As I say, if it's just everyone, fine, that can work sometimes. But this is just a way of encouraging you or funneling your thinking down in terms of who you are serving. So then when you've answered those two powerful questions, where in your business do you want to apply this trend? Is it a new product, a new service, a new brand, new pricing strategy, whatever it might be? Who do you want to serve? Okay, then you are ready, having done your analysis, having answered those two big apply questions, to think about your ideas. Your finished canvas will look something like this. Okay, often when I do this in a workshop with clients, it's either spread out on a big desk or it's pinned up on the wall with blue tack so everyone can argue about and discuss. So your finished canvas will look something like this. Once you've done the analysis, you've answered the two big apply questions, you are then ready to ideate, to have your ideas. What is that new product? What is that new service? Now, of course, I can't have your ideas for you. I wish I could. But I hope this has just been a little glimpse in how walking step by step through the consumer trend canvas, breaking the trend down in that way, in this case, the trend that is transparency, then answering those two apply questions primes you to be in the space to have that idea that could be transformative for your business. New product, new service, new campaign. I've done this. We've all at Trend Watching done this with clients so many times. Very, very powerful methodology that allows people to come up with ideas that they, I think, wouldn't have had, and that delight and surprise them because they have had them. So I'd love you to go to the Apply Toolkit inside the premium service, download the consumer trend canvas, print out a massive canvas, and do this with your team. Like I said, this was a super quick walkthrough, very, very quick. These workshops work best at like 90 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And of course, you know, they need multiple minds. They need discussion and deliberation and disagreement. Do this with your team. Take the truth that is transparency, take the examples I've given you today, and run through this exercise with your team. What are the basic human needs? What are the drivers of change? What are the emerging expectations? Where should we apply this? Who are we aiming at? You know, what's our big launch that we could get out of this truth that is transparency? A new app, a new product, a new sub-brand, a new business model or pricing strategy. It could lead you, I hope it would lead you to a really exciting launch for, you know, Q3 2017, Q4, Q1 2018, depends how quick and how ambitious you want to be time-wise. Okay, now I did talk about questions. I don't know if any of you have been writing some questions in. Okay, it sounds like we've had a couple. So one really quickly, which of the other truths do you think are powerful in retail? I mean, you know, the key to the 5 truths is that all 5 of them are big, powerful forces shaping our future in the years ahead. They all offer really powerful opportunities to brands. Positive impact, to my mind, is a really obvious other truth for retail, because we know consumers are trapped in this guilt spiral when it comes to the impacts of their consumption on the planet, on society, and so on. How can retailers help assuage that guilt spiral? Positive impact is a really crucial one. So if you don't want to run through this exercise with transparency, because we've done that today, you could run through this exercise with positive impact on the consumer trend canvas. And I think that would be a really powerful one. But you could do it with any of the truths and it would be powerful. But we chose transparency because it just seems most acutely powerful, most acutely relevant for retail right now. And a second question, yeah, how do the truths relate to the 16 megatrends? That's a great question. I mean, we've talked about 5 truths of truthful consumerism, 5 big forces shaping our future. So you can see that those big 5 forces map best onto our 16 megatrends. Not our trends, but our 16 megatrends. Each truth maps to maybe 1 or 2 megatrends that are most closely aligned. So when it comes to transparency, transparency is all about information. So obviously the transparency truth maps pretty directly really onto the infolust megatrend. And the other truths in a similar way map onto a megatrend or maybe 2 megatrends. And if you go to the final page of the PDF, the Truthful Consumerism PDF that you have in the Truthful Consumerism page in the premium service, you can read about how each truth maps onto the megatrend. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah, I know we've talked about this already now. You know, there's a whole world of truths, or at least there's 5 other truths for you to choose from. Run this exercise with the truth that is transparency, but run it too with the other truths if you want. Aspiration, positive impact, tolerance, empowerment. Those truths also offer really powerful, clearly really powerful, exciting opportunities for retail brands in 2017 and beyond. Okay, that's more than enough for me. I hope you enjoyed listening. I hope it was useful. Thank you so much for tuning in. More webinars coming in the subsequent days this week on other industries, on truthful consumerism and other industries. So do tune into those too if you're interested. I will check out from now. Thank you and goodbye.